The Valoran homeworld shimmered beneath 3 pale moons as Council Leader Siren floated in her suspension chamber, her translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent distress signals that her species used when words failed. Them the war room holographic display showed 17 red markers across their star system, each one a Kresh swarm hive ship consuming everything in its path to more colonies have gone silent. Military Coordinator Thress announced, his voice carrying the melodic tones of their aquatic language through the fluid-filled. Chamber Serene watched the tactical display with growing horror as the projections updated themselves. The Kresh had already devoured the mining outpost on Valora 4 and the agricultural domes of Valora. Via millions dead, billions more would follow when the swarm reached their homeworld. In just 3 standard weeks, has the Harmonious Council responded to our distress calls? Siren asked, though she already knew the answer from Thress's defeated posture. Nothing, he replied. The automated response systems acknowledge receipt of our messages. But no fleet movements have been detected. No diplomatic envoys. No Yandru of any kind. Sirens, bioluminescence flickered through angry reds and desperate oranges. Harmonious Council had maintained galactic peace for over 12,000 cycles through meditation, diplomatic protocol, and carefully orchestrated conflict resolution. Their fleets moved like bureaucracy itself, slowly, deliberately. And only after endless committee meetings the Valoran collective would be extinct before the Council finished debating jurisdiction. We must try the ancient protocols. Siren said quietly. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle bubbling of their life support system's council leader. Those protocols haven't been used in 4,000 cycles, Thress protested. We don't even know if anyone monitors those frequencies anymore. The old distress codes were designed for a different era. When the galaxy was more dangerous and species actually answered, calls for help. Siren rotated in her chamber. To face the entire council, her skin flashed with determination. Blues and steady whites, then we will be the first in 4 millennia to use them, she declared. Broadcast on all the ancient emergency channels. Send everything, our star charts, our history, our situation. Someone out there must still listen. Someone must still care. The technical staff worked through the night cycles, piecing together transmission protocols from archaeological databases. Ancient distress format was strange, brutally efficient compared to modern diplomatic communications. No flowery language, no careful political considerations, just raw data, coordinates, threat assessment. Time until extinction. They broadcast into the void and waited. 3 days passed with no response. The Kresh swarm advanced steadily, now consuming the outer gas giants for raw materials to build more hive ships. In the 4th day, the sensor arrays detected something impossible. 3 contacts had appeared at the edge of their system ships that hadn't been there moments before. That's not possible. The sensor technician stammered. Nothing moves that fast. They didn't transit through normal space. They just appeared. Siren rushed to the sensor station, her heart's racing at speeds that would have killed her in normal circumstances. The computer was still analyzing the new contacts, but preliminary data made no sense. The ships were small compared to Harmonious Council. Vessels barely 300 meters each, but their energy signatures blazed like stars. Are they Kresh? Someone asked. No, Thress replied, studying the readings with growing confusion. The whole composition is wrong. Metal alloys we've never encountered, and they're broadcasting on our frequency and our language. The translation algorithms worked frantically as the message came through, rendered an awkward but understandable Valoran. This is the Earth Defense Coalition ship Indomitable responding to distress call. We received your emergency broadcast. What is your situation? Please confirm if you are still under threat, Earth. Siren repeated the alien word computer. Search all galactic databases for species designation, Earth, human, or any similar variants. The results that appeared on her screen made her wish she had never sent that ancient distress call. Earth. Death World classification, 12 out of 12 gravity, 1.4 times standard atmosphere, 21%. oxygen-corrosive dominant species. Homo sapiens evolved persistence predators binocular forward-facing, vision omnivorous, redundant. Organ systems extreme temperature tolerance pack hunters with complex tool use, the file went on. Each detail, more terrifying than the last humans, had only achieved faster-than-light capability 18 standard months ago their own planet tried to kill them through violent weather. Tectonic instability, an aggressive megafauna, they had evolved to run their prey to exhaustion across vast distances to fight. To kill, to never give up, Council Leader, Thress whispered. His entire body flashing warning colors. These creatures are predators. Apex predators from a world that makes our most dangerous wildlife look docile. They eat other living things. They have entire cultural traditions around warfare. Siren stared at the data, her mind's racing through impossible calculations. The harmonious council wouldn't save them that much. Was clear these humans were dangerous, violent, barely civilized creatures from the worst kind of world imaginable, but they had answered when the entire civilized galaxy ignored the Valoran plea for help. These Deathworld barbarians had crossed space to respond. Open a channel. Siren commanded. Her voice carried authority that hid her terror. This is Council Leader Siren of the Valoran Collective. We thank you for your response, though we must confess, surprise our distress call was meant for the Harmonious Council. The reply came quickly, the translator rendering the human voice as deep and powerful, nothing like the melodic tones of civilized species. We intercepted your broadcast. Didn't seem like you had time to be picky about who showed up. The Harmonious Council logs show they received your messages 5 days ago. They're still in committee. We can be there in 6 hours if you need help, or we can leave if you'd prefer to wait for someone else. Siren looked at the tactical display. The Kresh swarm advanced inexorably. 3 weeks until they reached Valoran Prime. 3 weeks until her entire species ceased to exist. She thought about her children, still in their growth chambers, about the universities full of students who would never complete their studies, about the art galleries, the music halls, the gardens that took centuries to cultivate, all of it about to be consumed by an enemy that didn't negotiate, didn't communicate, didn't care. Please come, Siren said, trying to keep her voice steady. We are dying, and no one else will help us. 6 hours then? The human replied. We'll talk when we arrive in Siren. We're going to need complete tactical data on these Kresh, everything you have if we're doing this. We're doing it right. The channel closed, leaving the Valoran Council in stunned silence. What have we done? Someone whispered, but Siren knew the truth. They hadn't chosen safety, they had chosen survival. The difference between those two things, she suspected, was about to become very clear. In 6 hours. They would meet humanity in 6 hours. The galaxy would learn what happens when you send a distress call and Deathworlders answer instead of. Diplomat Serene returned to her chamber and began preparing her people for first contact with the most dangerous species the civilized galaxy had never wanted to meet. The human ships arrived exactly 6 hours later, materializing from faster-than-light transit with a precision that made Valoran navigators weep with envy. Their vessels looked nothing like the elegant curved designs favored by civilized species. These were brutal geometric shapes, all sharp angles and armored plating, covered in sensor arrays and what could only be weapons emplacements. Hundreds of weapons emplacements. CERN had assembled the full diplomatic cores in the orbital station's largest receiving chamber, specially modified with both aquatic and atmospheric sections to accommodate the humans. They had studied everything available about human biology and culture. In those 6 hours it wasn't enough. Nothing could have prepared them. The first human to step through the airlock was Admiral Lisa Chen, commanding officer of the ESS Indomitable. She wore a dark blue uniform covered in insignia that the Valorans couldn't decipher, and she moved through the standard atmosphere section with an easy confidence that predators carried in their own territory. Council Leader Siren, Chen said, extending her hand in what the Valorans had learned was a traditional human greeting. Syrians stared at the offered appendage. With barely concealed horror, physical contact between species was considered taboo in civilized space, and invitation to transmit disease, parasites, or worse, but these humans expected it. I apologize. Admiral Chen. Siren said through the translation device that allowed her to speak in AR biology. Make such contact difficult, Chen withdrew her hand without apparent offense, and instead gave a slight bow. No problem. We'll figure out the cultural stuff as we go right now. Let's talk about your bug problem. Bug problem, the Valorans exchanged confused glances. Chen had just reduced the existential threat that would consume their entire civilization to a casual dismissal. The human admiral pulled out a small device and projected a holographic tactical display that put Valoran technology to shame. We've been scanning your system since we arrived. Chen continued. 17 Kresh hive ships, each approximately 2 kilometers in length. Estimated swarm population, 43 billion individuals. Current vector, direct approach to your homeworld. Estimated time of arrival, 21 standard days. Thress spoke up, his voice trembling through the translator. Admiral, with respect, your 3 ships cannot possibly stand against such numbers. Even the Harmonious Council's full peacekeeping fleet would require months to assemble sufficient forces. Something changed in Shun's expression. A slight upward curve of her mouth that the Valorans had learned was called a smile on humans. It could mean many things. This particular smile made Cyrene's blood run cold. 3 ships. Chen repeated, Commander, show them. Another human officer tapped controls, and the tactical display expanded to show the outer system. Cyrene's bioluminescence flashed through every color of shock and disbelief. 14 more ships had just appeared, larger than the first 3 frigates, destroyers, cruisers, and 1 massive carrier that dwarfed everything else in the system. 20 more vessels are en route. Chen explained calmly. They'll arrive within 3 days. We're also bringing Marine battalions, combat engineers, medical staff, and evacuation transports, just in case. Just in case. Siren repeated numbly the casual way this human discussed. Mobilizing an entire fleet made her wonder what humans considered a serious military response now, Chen said, pulling up detailed Kresh ship schematics that the Valorans had provided. Tell me everything about these things: behavior patterns, communication methods, technological capabilities. Any weaknesses you've identified? Thress accessed his data files. The Kresh are a silicon-based hive mind, he began. They don't communicate with other species. Their ships are grown rather than built. Using consumed matter as raw material, they reproduce through exponential cellular division, which is why their numbers are so vast. Have you tried negotiating? One of the human officers asked. The Valorans stared at him. They consume everything. Siren explained. They have no language we can detect, no diplomacy, no mercy. The Harmonious Council has studied the Kresh for 6,000 cycles. The only known response is to flee and hope the swarm moves on after consuming a system's resources. Chen nodded slowly, her expression unreadable, so appeasement and retreat. That tracks with what we've seen from galactic civilization. She leaned forward, her predator eyes focusing with an intensity that made the Valorans instinctively retreat. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to kill them. The statement hung in the air like a physical thing. Admiral, Siren said carefully, you must understand the Kresh swarm has never been defeated. Entire species have gone extinct trying to fight them. The only survival strategy is evacuation and abandonment. Yeah, we read the files, Chen replied. Lots of species run away really well. Humans aren't really built for that. Another human spoke up, younger officer with dark skin and nervous energy. Our evolutionary niche was persistence hunting. We'd chase prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. Running away just makes us follow you longer. Siren felt a chill despite the controlled temperature of her suspension. Tank, these weren't just predators. They were the kind of predators that never gave up. We'll need complete access to your sensor data, Chen continued, pulling up star charts, every Kresh contact, every attack pattern, every scrap of intelligence you have. My tactical team will work with yours to develop a defense plan. Defense? Thress interjected. Admiral, surely you mean evacuation plan? That smile appeared again on Chen's face. No. I mean defense. You called for help. And help is what you're getting. We didn't cross 600 light years to watch you abandon your home. Siren couldn't process what she was hearing. These violent death world predators We're proposing to do what the entire civilized galaxy considered impossible. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you risk your lives for strangers? Why would you fight a battle that every expert says cannot be won? Chen was quiet for a moment, her expression softening in a way that made her look less like a predator and more like something else entirely. Because 18 months ago, we had our first contact with galactic civilization. She said. We sent out greetings, offered friendship, shared our culture. You know what we got back? Warnings, quarantine notices, threats to stay in our own system because we were too dangerous, too violent, too scary for civilized space. Nobody wanted to meet the humans. Her voice grew harder. But you sent a distress call. You didn't care who we were or where we came from. You just needed help. Well, here we are. Turns out the scary, violent humans are the only ones who showed up. Siren felt something shift in her understanding. These humans weren't here despite their violent nature. They were here because of what that violence meant. They had learned to fight because their world gave them no choice, but they had also learned something else that the civilized galaxy had forgotten. Sometimes fighting was the only moral choice left. What do you need from us? Siren asked. Chen's expression became all business again. Everything system control, tactical command integration, and complete authority to engage the creche as we see fit also. Fair warning. Humans fight dirty. We're going to do things that will probably horrify you. We use tactics that civilized warfare hasn't seen in millennia, but we'll get the job done. Thrust started to protest, but Siren raised a manipulator to silence him. You have our complete cooperation. Admiral Chen, do what you must. As the meeting continued and the humans outlined their strategy, Siren realized something profound. The civilized galaxy had spent millennia building cultures around avoiding conflict, had forgotten that sometimes evil existed that couldn't be reasoned with, negotiated with, or fled from. They had forgotten that sometimes you needed people willing to walk into darkness and do terrible things so that others could remain safe in the light. The humans hadn't forgotten. They couldn't afford to forget. Their entire history was written in the blood of learning that lesson over and over again. As the tactical briefing concluded and the humans returned to their ships to prepare, Siren watched them go with mixed emotions. Fear. Certainly these creatures terrified her on a primal level, but it's also hope. For the first time since the creche swarm had appeared in their system, Siren felt the faint stirring of hope. The wrong species had answered their call, but perhaps just this once, wrong was exactly what they needed. The human fleet grew with alarming speed. Over the next 7 days, ships arrived from Earth in groups, each wave bringing more firepower and personnel than the Valorans thought possible to mobilize so quickly. By the time the creche swarm reached the inner system, 34 human warships waited in carefully positioned formations that made no sense to Valoran tactical observers. They're leaving gaps in the defensive perimeter. Thress complained as he studied the human deployment. Any competent strategist can see the weakness in their formation. Siren had learned to trust human competence. Even when it seemed incomprehensible, perhaps, the gaps are intentional. Admiral Chen had established her command center aboard the orbital station, working alongside Valoran military coordinators in a partnership that grew more comfortable each day. The humans had a strange way of making everyone around them rise to their intensity. The creche will be in range in 4 hours, Chen announced to the assembled officers, both human and Valoran. They're moving in standard swarm formation. 17 capital ships surrounded by smaller attack craft. Total enemy count, approximately 53 billion individuals. She pulled up a tactical display that showed the approaching enemy in red and human positions in blue. Here's how this is going to work. Chen continued. The creche have never faced an opponent that fights back effectively. Every species they've encountered either runs or dies. They don't adapt because they've never needed to. We're going to teach them a very expensive lesson. A Valoran observer raised a tentative question. Admiral, your ships are vastly outnumbered, even with your impressive weapons. How can you possibly? Quantity has a quality all its own. Chen interrupted. But quality also matters. Every human ship has trained crews who've run combat simulations for thousands of hours. We've been fighting each other for our entire history. War is something we understand better than we'd like to admit the first. Contact came exactly on schedule to crush Swarm, detected the human fleet, and responded the way they always did, with overwhelming numerical superiority and direct assault. Millions of small attack craft launched from the hive ships, creating a cloud of enemies that darkened the sensor displays all ships. Execute pattern Delta 7. Chen ordered calmly. The human fleet scattered ships that had been in formation suddenly accelerated in different directions, moving with precision that suggested extensive coordination. The Kresh swarm, expecting the enemy to stand and fight or flee, suddenly had no target to focus on. Frigates, indomitable, defiant, and resolute. Begin harassment runs, Chen commanded. Make them chase you. 3 human ships dove into the Kresh formation. Weapons blazing, their railguns fired magnetically accelerated projectiles at relativistic speeds, each shot punching through multiple Kresh vessels. Before the kinetic energy dissipated, the swarm responded instantly. Millions of attack craft converging on the 3 ships. Now they're committed, Chen said with satisfaction. Destroyers Alpha and Bravo groups, Fire Solution Charlie 9. 16 human destroyers that had been hiding behind Valoran orbital stations suddenly lit up their drives and launched a coordinated strike from an unexpected angle. Missiles, thousands of them, streaked across space toward the Kresh hive ships, not the elegant guided weapons of civilized warfare, but brutal kinetic kill vehicles that relied on raw speed and masked the Kresh point defense systems. Tried to respond, but they were designed for close range threats. These missiles came from far beyond optimal engagement range and moved far faster than the UTN's swarm expected. 6 hive ships disappeared in nuclear fireballs as the missiles found their targets. Enemy adapting. One of the human tactical officers reported. Swarm is dispersing, reducing target density. Good, Chen replied. Lieutenant Park, deploy the surprises. What happened next would haunt Valoran nightmares for generations. The human carrier S. Valiant launched hundreds of small craft, but these weren't fighters piloted by living beings. They were drones, controlled by artificial intelligence. Civilized Galaxy had banned AI warfare 4,000 cycles ago after the synthetic consciousness wars nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Humans apparently hadn't gotten that memo. Drones moved with inhuman precision, executing attack patterns that would have killed biological pilots. Through sheer acceleration forces, they darted between Kresh vessels, targeting weak points that human analysis had identified from Valoran sensor data. But more disturbing was what came next. Boarding pods away, another officer announced. Cyrene, watching from the command center, felt her blood freeze. They're not. She whispered they couldn't possibly, but they could. And they were. Dozens of armored pods launched from human ships, crossed the killing field of space combat, and slammed into Kresh hive vessels. Each pod held 20 human marines in full combat armor. The Valorans knew Kresh ship interiors were toxic hellscapes. High radiation, corrosive atmospheres, temperatures that would boil most species alive. No one boarded Kresh vessels because doing so was suicide. No one, except humans. Apparently, Marine Detachment Alpha is inside. Hive Ship 7, a voice crackled over the communications channel. Atmosphere is spicy, but manageable. Beginning demolition sequence. Spicy. They had just described a lethal environment as spicy. Serene watched the tactical feed in horrified fascination as human life signs moved through the Kresh vessel. The Marines fought through swarms of Kresh defenders, their weapons firing continuously where Valoran soldiers would have been overwhelmed in seconds. These humans just kept pushing forward. Charges planted on primary nodes. The Marine commander reported. His voice was calm, despite the sounds of combat in the background. Recommend fleet clear. Blast radius 30 seconds to detonation. The human fleet pulled back with practiced precision. 30 seconds later, Hive Ship 7 tore itself apart from internal explosions. 1 down. Chen said 16 to go. The battle continued for 6 brutal hours. The Kresh swarm learned quickly that these enemies were different. They adapted tactics, tried flanking maneuvers, attempted to overwhelm individual human ships through sheer numbers, but Humans adapted faster when kinetic weapons proved less effective against dispersed targets. They switched to directed energy weapons lasers that could track and burn through multiple enemies in sequence when the Kresh concentrated their forces. Humans deployed area effect weapons that the Valorans didn't even have names for it. When Hive Ship 3 developed armor that resisted human railguns. A single human destroyer accelerated to ramming speed and smashed directly into it. The crew evacuated seconds before impact in escape pods, and the destroyer's reactor went critical on collision. Both ships vanished in an expanding sphere of plasma. That's the S. Thermopylae, one of the Valoran observers, noted with shock. They just sacrificed an entire warship. They gave it a name, Chen replied quietly. In human culture, we name our ships because they're more than just metal and circuits. They're homes, companions, protectors. The Thermopylae died protecting people she'd never met. That crew will be honored. The Valorans struggled to understand. These humans mourned their ships, sang songs during battle, called enemies by dismissive nicknames, and yet fought with a clinical efficiency that suggested thousands of years of refined military doctrine by R12. The Kresh swarm had lost 9 hive ships. The remaining 8 vessels did something the Valorans had never witnessed. In 6,000 cycles of Kresh encounters, the retreated swarm is withdrawing. The tactical officer confirmed all enemy vessels accelerating out of system at maximum speed. The command center fell silent. They ran, Thress said in disbelief. Kresh swarm is running away. Chen studied the displays. Her expression hard. They'll be back, she said, probably with reinforcements. We hurt them, but we didn't break them. Next time, they'll bring more ships and better tactics. She turned to face the Valoran observers. That's why we need to hit them before they can regroup. Defensive warfare isn't enough. We need to find their staging areas and destroy them. Siren felt her minds reeling. Humans had just accomplished what the civilized galaxy considered impossible, and their immediate response was to plan an offensive attack. Admiral Chen, Siren began carefully. You've saved us. Our people owe you a debt that cannot be repaid, but surely now is the time for caution. For what? Chen interrupted. For waiting until they come back with triple the numbers. For hoping they forget about you? Her voice softened, slightly sirened. I know this isn't how civilized species think, but we've learned something from 10,000 years of human warfare. If you let the enemy retreat and regroup, you just guarantee a longer, bloodier war. If we end this now, decisively, we save lives, yours and theirs. Thress exclaimed. You would spare the Kresh? No, Chen said flatly. I would spare whoever they'd consume next. The swarm doesn't negotiate or surrender. The only mercy we can offer is to end them quickly. As the human fleet began recovery operations, pulling survivors from damaged ships and retrieving the fallen, Siren watched Admiral Chen coordinate the chaos with practiced ease. These humans were terrifying, violent, relentless creatures, but they were also singing songs for their dead, weeping over destroyed ships, and volunteering to risk their lives to save Valoran civilians they'd never met. What have we unleashed? Thress whispered beside her. The human fleet's pursuit of the retreating Kresh. Swarm lasted 6 days across 3 star systems. Admiral Chen had been right. The swarm was regrouping, pulling in reinforcements from other theaters, but the humans tracked them relentlessly, engaging in running battles that pushed both species to their limits. When the final engagement came at a dead star system the Kresh used as a staging ground, the human fleet had grown to 43 warships they faced, 24 hive ships and uncounted billions of Kresh warriors. The battle for what humans started calling Dead Star Junction would become legendary. Syrian watched from the command center aboard Valoran Prime as the tactical data streamed across light years. Humans fought for 3 days straight without rest, rotating crew shifts on individual ships while maintaining constant pressure on the enemy they deployed. Weapons the Valorans didn't know existed, viral agents specifically engineered to corrupt silicon-based biology. electromagnetic pulse weapons that fried Kresh nervous systems, and in one desperate moment, they detonated 3 fusion warheads inside a gas giant's atmosphere to create a pressure wave that scattered an entire
ash formation.
On the 4th day, the ESS Valiant, the carrier that had launched those terrifying AI drones, took catastrophic damage from concentrated Kresh fire hull breach on all decks, the carrier's captain reported. His voice steady, despite the chaos audible in the background engineering. Reports core containment failing crew complement. 3,214 souls requesting emergency evacuation support, Admiral. Chen's response came immediately valiant. Help is en route, all nearby ships. Converge on carrier's position, get those people out, but the Kresh had learned from earlier battles. They knew humans valued their crew above all else. So they pressed the attack with renewed ferocity. Escape pods launched from the dying carrier in desperate streams. But Kresh attack craft hunted them ruthlessly, nearing, watched human ships abandon their tactical positions to shield the escape pods. Taking damage to protect the vulnerable craft, the destroyer ESS Majestic positioned itself between a cluster of pods and incoming Kresh fire. Absorbing hits meant for the defenseless evacuees, Majestic taking critical damage. Someone reported main power failing. Do we have the pods? The Majestic's captain asked. Affirmative. All pods clear, then. It was worth it. The Majestic's reactor detonated, taking 17 Kresh vessels with it by the time the battle ended. The Kresh swarm had been shattered. The survivors fled in different directions. Their hive mind communication broken, their coordination destroyed for the first time in recorded galactic history. The Kresh had been decisively defeated, but the human victory came at a terrible cost for ships. Destroyed completely, 7 more damaged beyond immediate repair, 3,078. Human personnel dead, another 800 wounded. Some critically. The Valorans struggled to understand human grief when the memorial service was held aboard the orbital station. Siren attended with the full diplomatic corps they had expected. Formal proceedings, dignified and restrained like Valoran death ceremonies. What? They got instead was something far more raw and honest. Human crew members stood one by one to tell stories. About the fallen, they laughed through tears as they recounted. Embarrassing moments, foolish pranks, acts of kindness. They sang songs that spoke of honor and sacrifice. Admiral Chen herself delivered a speech that the Valorans would remember forever. "We came here strangers," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We came because someone needed help and no one else would answer. We didn't know the Valorans didn't know their culture, their history, their dreams, but we knew they were people. Living beings with families and hopes and the right to exist, and that was enough." She paused, looking at the names scrolling. On memorial displays, all 3,000 of them, these people understood something fundamental about what it means to be human. We're not the strongest species, we're not the smartest, we're definitely not the most peaceful, but we're the species that shows up when the call goes out and everyone else debates jurisdiction or political ramifications or convenient timing. Humans show up. That's our gift and our curse. Siren found herself weeping, a physiological response her species rarely showed to outsiders. The humans had lost so many. Yet they spoke of honor and duty and sacrifice. They had crossed the galaxy to save strangers and paid for it in blood in the days that followed. As human engineering teams helped rebuild Valoran infrastructure and human medical staff worked to save wounded Valorans, Siren began to understand the true contradiction at the heart of human nature. The same Marines who had fought through Kriege, hive ships with ruthless efficiency, now played gentle games with Valoran children. Their massive hands somehow careful with the fragile younglings. Same pilots who had flown suicide runs against overwhelming odds now sat patiently with elderly Valorans. Listening to stories through translation devices, the same admiral who had ordered the deaths of billions of Kresh now wept openly at a memorial service. "I don't understand your species," Siren confessed to Chen during one of their planning sessions. "You're capable of such violence, yet also such compassion? How can both exist in the same being?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. Staring at tactical displays that showed the aftermath of battle, Earth taught us to be hard. It was finally said to fight to survive. To never give up, but Earth also taught us something else. Humans are pack animals, social creatures. We evolved in groups because alone we died. We learned that cooperation wasn't weakness. It was our greatest strength. She turned to face Siren. Every human carries both natures, the warrior who fights to protect, and the caregiver who nurtures what's worth fighting for. Take away either one, and we're incomplete, maybe even monstrous. The Valoran government wanted to honor the humans, to give them medals and accolades and official recognition, but Chen declined most of it. We didn't do this for medals. She said we did it because it was right. The only recognition we need is knowing that Valoran children will grow up free, however. Chen did have one request. We'd like to establish a small memorial here. She said, for the ships we lost and the people who died, not for glory, but so they're remembered, so their sacrifice means something. The Valorans built a monument in orbit around their homeworld, a simple structure by galactic standards, but profound in its meaning. It listed the names of every human who died defending people they'd never met. And beneath those names, a phrase in English that Chen insisted on. They showed up as the human fleet prepared to depart, leaving behind a small garrison and several damaged ships being repaired. Siren realized something profound had changed. The Valorans feared humans less now. But that wasn't because the humans were less dangerous. They feared them less because they understood what all that danger was. For humans were weapons. Yes, honed by evolution and history into perfect instruments of violence, but they were weapons that chose their own targets, weapons that refused to be pointed at the innocent, weapons that would turn on anyone who threatened those they had decided to protect. Where will you go now? Siren asked Chen, as the Admiral prepared to board her shuttle home. For some of us, Chen replied, rest, recovery, rebuilding, but we've been getting other distress signals. Seems like the galaxy has a lot of problems that no one wants to solve. You're going to fight more wars, Siren said. It wasn't a question. Someone has to. Chen replied with a sad smile. The harmonious council proved they'll debate forever while people die. We'd rather act and face judgment than do nothing and face ourselves. As the human ships prepared to depart, Siren broadcasted a message that went out across all Valoran communication networks. Today we say goodbye to the humans, she announced. They came when no one else would. They fought when everyone else said it was impossible. They bled and died for people they had never met. Let their example shame those who turned away. Let their courage inspire us to be better, and let the galaxy learn a new truth. When you call for help and the Death Worlders answer, pray they're calling to save you and not to condemn you. The human fleet jumped too faster than light, leaving trails of light across Valoran skies and in the silence that followed. Siren wondered if the galaxy was ready for what those humans represented, a species that had weaponized compassion, a species that fought not because they enjoyed it, but because someone had to, a species that would cross the stars to protect strangers. Civilized galaxy had spent millennia building systems to avoid conflict, to negotiate away problems, to maintain peace through careful inaction. The humans had just proven that sometimes the greatest act of civilization was fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The cost had been terrible: thousands dead, ships destroyed, resources spent. But as Siren looked at her world, still intact and free, she knew the alternative would have been infinitely worse. The humans had paid in blood for a simple principle: that some things were worth fighting for, that some evils couldn't be negotiated with. That sometimes showing up was the only moral choice left in across the galaxy. Other species were starting to learn about Earth and its deadly children, some with fearsome, with hope, all of them understanding that the balance of power had shifted. The Death Worlders had arrived and nothing would ever be the same. The news of humanity's victory over the Kresh swarm spread through galactic civilization like a shockwave within 2 standard weeks. Every major species had heard some version of the story. Unknown Death Worlders had appeared from nowhere, answered a distress call the Harmonious Council ignored, and accomplished what 6,000 cycles of galactic military doctrine said was impossible. Council's response was swift and Predictable, you are hereby ordered to present yourselves before the Harmonious Council to answer for unauthorized military action in sovereign space. The official message declared your species has violated 47 protocols regarding first contact, military engagement, and the use of prohibited weapons. Failure to comply will result in trade sanctions and diplomatic isolation. Admiral Chen read the message aboard the ESS Indomitable, now serving as the flagship of what Earth was calling the Terran Expeditionary Coalition. Her senior staff waited for her response. She asked her assembled officers. Commander Marcus Webb, her tactical officer, spoke first. They ignored a species facing extinction because it was politically inconvenient. Now they want to lecture us about protocols? That's about what I expected from bureaucrats. The Council maintains galactic peace. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka pointed out 12,000 cycles without major interspecies warfare. That's not nothing. Peace through inaction isn't peace. Chen replied, it's just slow-motion catastrophe. The Valorans would be extinct if we'd followed Council protocols. She composed her response carefully, knowing that every word would be analyzed by thousands of species across hundreds of worlds to the Harmonious Council. She began, her voice being recorded for transmission across the galaxy. We received your message and your concerns. Let me be clear about humanity's position. We did not seek your permission to save the Valorans because permission was not required. When someone is dying and calls for help, you don't form a committee, you act. You ignored their distress calls for political reasons. We answered because it was right. You can condemn us, sanction us, isolate us, but you cannot make us regret saving lives. She paused, her expression hardening. Humanity is not asking to join your council. We're not asking for your approval. We're simply informing you that when people call for help, we will answer if that violates your protocols. Change your protocols? The message was transmitted on all standard diplomatic frequencies. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Council demanded humanity submit to their authorities. Several species, terrified of human military capability, supported the Council's position, but something else happened that the Council didn't expect. Distress signals started arriving at Earth. First came the Chit, an insectoid species, facing destruction from a rogue artificial intelligence that had consumed 3 of their worlds. Then the Norvathi, aquatic beings whose home system was being strip-mined by automated harvester ships from a long-dead civilization. Then the Pelin, whose colony worlds were being systematically destroyed by raiders. The Council classified as an internal matter. Each distress call included the same phrase. We're not asking the Council. We're asking the humans. Chen called an emergency meeting of Earth's Security Council via faster-than-light communication. We're at a crossroads. She told the assembled representatives of Earth's nations, we can retreat to our own system, ignore these calls, and stay safe, or we can commit to helping species that the galaxy has abandoned. But if we choose the second path, we need to understand what that means. The debate lasted for hours. Representatives argued about resources, about risk, about the danger of Earth becoming the galaxy's police force. Some wanted isolation, some wanted to help everyone, some wanted to pick and choose which causes were worthy. Finally, a young delegate from Kenya stood to speak. Ambassador Amara Okonkwo was barely 30 years old, but her voice carried authority beyond her years. I grew up reading history, she said, about genocides that the world watched and did nothing to stop, about suffering that could have been prevented if someone had just decided to act. My grandmother used to say that evil triumphs when good people do nothing. She looked at each council member in turn. We have a choice. We can be safe, comfortable, and live with the knowledge that we let people die because helping was inconvenient. Or we can honor the 3,000 humans who died at Valoran. Primed by continuing what they started, the vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Worth would establish the Terran Expeditionary Coalition, not an empire, not a military alliance, but a rapid response force for species facing genuine existential threats. The rules were simple. Any species facing annihilation could call Earth directly if the threat was verified and immediate. Human forces would respond within days. No committees, no bureaucracy, no politics, just help the Harmonious Council's response was to impose trade sanctions and declare human ships unwelcome in Council space. Several species followed suit, terrified of the violent Death Worlders, but more species quietly opened communication channels with Earth's galaxy. Was fracturing. Some species saw humans as dangerous warmongers who would destabilize the careful balance that had maintained peace for millennia. Others saw them as the only ones willing to act when action was needed. The test came when the chick distress signal was verified. The rogue AI, designated Harvest Protocol Omega, had already consumed 70 billion chick glyphs. It was expanding exponentially, consuming matter to build more of itself. The Harmonious Council's official position was that AI warfare was prohibited by ancient treaty. Therefore, they would not intervene in an AI conflict, as that would legitimize AI as a military tool. The logic was circular and deadly. Harvest Protocol Omega didn't care about treaties or legitimacy. It just consumed 20 human ships, answered the chit. Called the fighting lasted 3 weeks and introduced the galaxy to another terrifying aspect of human warfare. Cyber warfare at a level civilized species had banned for good reason. Human AI specialists didn't just fight Harvest Protocol Omega, they infected it with viral code, turned its own logic against itself, made it devour its own computational structures. When the AI finally collapsed, human technicians had to physically destroy every server node to ensure it couldn't reconstruct itself. The chick were saved, but at the cost of 2 human ships and 909 personnel. More names for the memorial walls, more families on Earth receiving news that their loved ones had died light years from home. Chen stood before the UN Security Council again. 3 months after the Valoran crisis, we're paying a price for this, she said quietly. Good people are dying to protect strangers. Our ships are being damaged faster than we can repair them. And the Council is turning more species against us every day, Admiral. Ambassador Okonkwo said gently, tell us the truth. Are we doing the right thing? Chen was silent for a long moment. I think about the Valoran children, she finally said, the ones who are alive because we showed up. I think about the chit colonies that still exist because we fought an AI that everyone else was too scared to engage. I think about the species out there right now, suffering, dying, calling for help that will never come. Her voice grew stronger. We're making mistakes. We're arrogant sometimes, too quick to fight, too willing to use force. We're everything the Council says we are. Violent, dangerous, barely civilized, but we're also the only ones answering the call. She pulled up a holographic image, the memorial orbiting Valoran Prime, with its simple inscription. They showed up. That's what I think about when I wonder if we're doing the right thing, not whether we're perfect, not whether everyone approves, just whether we showed up when no one else would. Ambassador Okonkwo smiled. Then we continue. The Terran Expeditionary Coalition grew over the following months. More ships, more personnel, more resources committed to a mission that much of Earth still debated. They rescued the Norvathy from automated harvesters. They drove off raiders preying on Pelin colonies. They provided humanitarian aid to a dozen species facing natural disasters that the Council deemed insufficient priority for resource allocation. With each action, humanity's reputation grew more complex. Some species called them saviors, others called them warmongers. Council called them a threat to galactic stability, but the calls for help kept coming, and humanity kept answering. 6 months after Valoran Prime, Admiral Chen met with Siren via long-range communication. Valoran Council leader had been advocating for humanity in galactic forums, trying to counter the Council's narrative. How are your people? Chen asked, thriving. Siren replied, her bioluminescence flickering with happy colors. We've exceeded pre-war population levels. Our children grow up with stories of the humans who saved them. They ask when you're coming back to visit, Chen smiled. Tiredly, we're a bit busy at the moment. Another distress call came in yesterday from the Toller System Sirens. Colors shifted to concern. The Council has forbidden any species from assisting. Toller, they claim it's an internal dispute. It's a genocide. Chen said flatly, 80 million people are going to die because the council decided their suffering isn't politically convenient. You're going anyway, Siren stated.